Hi, today we're having a very special conversation, a conversation on a topic that is extremely close to my heart, and it's about climate anxiety. Let's start by talking about what is the definition of climate anxiety. As you see on your screen, it's a chronic fear of environmental doom or the generalized sense that the ecological foundations of existence are in the process of collapse. Climate change has important implications for the health and futures of children and young people. Yet they have very little power to limit its harm, making them vulnerable to climate anxiety. In December 2021, the Lancet published a first of its kind, large scale investigation of climate anxiety in children and young people globally and its relationship with perceived government response. They surveyed 10,000 children and young people aged between 16 to 25 years in 10 countries, so about 1,000 children respondents, young respondents from each of these countries. And respondents across all countries were worried about climate change. The top line, about 59% respondents were very or extremely worried, and 84% were at least moderately worried about climate change. And what was even more disappointing for me was that more than half of the respondents reported each of the following emotions. They expressed sadness, anxiety, anger, powerlessness, helplessness, and guilt. Towards that end, towards understanding what climate anxiety might mean for you as a young person, what it might mean for you as a young professional, Divinity paired up with HPAIR. Now, what is HPAIR? HPAIR is the Harvard College project for Asian and international relations, and it was founded in 1991 to create a forum of exchange for students and young professionals to discuss and learn about the most important economic, political, and social issues facing the Asia Pacific region. And today we're going to be talking to the winners of the HPAIR challenge. In the mental health category. Allow me to bring them on one by one. Let me actually start geographically, somebody very close to where I'm based at this point in time. Welcome, Noshin. You're based in Montreal.
Yes. Hello. Hi.
Hi. Okay, we're going to go over to Europe. We welcome Leah, who is based in France at this point in time. And finally, somebody who's joining us far, far, far away from where I'm at right now, Ina from Hong Kong. It's late night for you. So thank you so much for making the effort and time to come and be with us. So you guys were at the Divinity Impact Challenge 2023. Heartiest congratulations for winning it in the mental health category. Um, so this year in the mental health category, the Versa Foundation and the Divinity Research Program were invited to offer a case challenge, and we did so, and we did it on climate anxiety. And four of you put your heads together, and there were other classmates or teammates of yours as well uh, with you, and you helped us in creating almost creating a survey and designing a questionnaire on climate anxiety and obviously you immersed yourself in the topic as well. So this conversation is really going to be about you. Okay, you as young women of color, women professionals, women students, and trying to navigate your work and your values in this big wide world. So thank you so much and welcome again. So let me actually start with the first question for each of you. What's your why? What do you love? Does anyone want to start? Noshin, do you want to start?
Oh.
I could start.
Okay.
I'm an expressive arts therapist. Arts has always been something I'm really passionate about. Like, don't get me wrong, like I'm not like a very good artist. It's just that I love how art makes us feel cared for and can help heal people. So that's really my main passion, my main why is to create opportunities through arts for people to have that breakthrough moment, have that self understanding or self healing or personal growth.
Leah?
Yeah, I want to apologize in advance because I think my internet connection is a bit weak, so I can hear the audio a bit delayed. But I think my why is just that I want to connect people to their passions, and I also want to find my own passions. And I want to enable people to act upon their passions as much as possible. And I love having honest conversations with strangers and getting to know their perspectives on the world, as I think that is the best way to learn about the world from a different perspective. And yeah, that's my why.
And that's what you love. So thank you. Noshin, you ready?
Yeah, so if I had to talk about, say, what's my why, I would say it's activism. Right. So I do believe in the power of youth. I have been involved with creating awareness, like large scale awareness campaigns and back home regarding especially like stigmatized topics like, say, mental health, sex education, climate change, etc. And I have sort of received backlash over the years, which just makes me feel like we are creating impact, we are creating conversation back home. It's something I started doing in high school, and I just want to, like, reach larger platforms to engage more of youth into these conversations. So that would be that. And then if I had to talk about what do I love? My passion would be writing. So I took up a job back in during the pandemic where I started writing. Like it was like initially it was just like thought or like opinion articles and pieces, and it was quite well received. And over time, it added like dimensions to my personality. Like right now, I feel like having that job as a journalist is it translates to more of me seeing my ideas on print, and that makes me feel it is probably the most validating thing for me in the world, to see that it's not just things I'm saying, it's things that are good enough to be on paper and there are people who agree with it. And it's just, I mean, it's just something that growing up in like a conservative community as, like, say, a BIPOC woman who wasn't allowed to have opinions on serious issues like policies and politics. I felt like this was a game changer for me. Like with every article that I write, every time I see myself get published, I feel like that whole imposter syndrome breaks away, and it is definitely something that I'm very passionate about and I want to continue doing. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. So, with Ina, it's the power of expression through arts and also the power of healing when we express ourselves. And for Leah, it's really the power of compassion, the power of empathy, the power of passion, and also igniting, helping others ignite their passion. And for you, Noshin, it sounds like it's the power of activism and to really heal yourself and feel validated through your writing, and also impart that healing and through your activist
Right.
expression through writing.
Right.
That is so beautiful. What's my why, right? Like I was sharing with you before, my why is to design content and conversation that connects the dots, and which is why this is what we do at Divinity, with connecting the dots, and also instill active hope and compassion for not just others, but also for ourselves. Because if we have it for ourselves and we have very good nervous system regulation, we'll be able to impart it to others. All right, okay, let's move along this conversation. So now, looking at the future, we're headed into, what are some of your concerns? Let's start with you and we'll go through the same sequence.
Sure. I'm like a little bit of sad news also. My father uh had cancer, like during COVID as well, like at the start of COVID. So it caused a lot of delays in his treatment. So far, so good, but he's now in remission. But it really, you know, made me really worry about my own future. Like taking good care of my health has been now a top priority on top of the pandemic. Like, oh, what if I also someday get cancer because it is, genetically hereditary. So I was like really, really anxious about that. So health is really one of the main concerns right now.
Yes. Okay. And we're going to go over to Noshin, and we'll wait for, if Leah is able to join us back. But thank you so much for sharing that very personal, situation. We hope that your father continues to stay in remission. Noshin.
Right. So I think for me, it has the way I was looking at, like, say, the world pre-pandemic and after pandemic has had a huge impact. Like before pandemic, it was like a regular life and you're just getting through. And then the pandemic hit, and both of my parents are frontline workers, so they were in charge of like the COVID wards back home, and so that suddenly left me with just me to take care of my sister, and I dropped a year and I was taking care of her, and every day was this, like, this despair and anxiety regarding I don't know if my parents are going to be okay. And like, I remember, like, the best consolation my parents could come up with was telling me, look, we work in different hospitals, it's unlikely both of us end up with the same variant at the same time, one of us will make it. And it was mind blow, like, it was just like the amount of stress I felt at that moment made me realize that this subconscious idea that if you're like a young person, you don't feel anxiety as much, or your anxiety is fake, your mental health problems are not, it can't be as bad as, you haven't even seen life yet. So that conversation was thrown off when I experienced that firsthand, that, oh my god, this is very real. And then there was the whole thing where I moved, like, as I said, that I've moved to Canada some months back, and as a young immigrant, and as someone who's like, just starting to see life and travel to new places and want to have a lot of things to do, I constantly feel this climate change issue come up, and I am annoyed and angry that more people in power are not doing enough, because we are now stressed. Like, I remember being in the Harvard conference, and there was this speaker who was talking about nuclear bombs and all the after effects, and I couldn't believe that there are people who know about this and then they're not doing anything. And it felt like betrayal, that they are the people in charge of our future and they're definitely not doing enough. Which is why I feel like, the activism needs to step up, and you need more young people, because, I mean, come on, I mean, there is no way that we are at doing the best we can, and the best cannot be this, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Leah, you're back with us. So what do you think are some of your concerns?
So, I think my main concern is that technology way that, especially in my private life lately, that I realized I can't walk past a group of teenagers without having to take out my phone and looking at my phone because I feel so uncomfortable. Like in social interactions, I feel like in general, our generation has lost that skill quite a bit. And I've also noticed that people that I consider to be very genuine friends, when I see them hanging out without me online, that I become very anxious about them not feeling the way about me as I do about them. So I just feel like in general, technology has become such a source of anxiety for me rather than a source of connection. And I think that is one of my main concerns, that individuals become progressively more isolated, and there is this like general like individualization rather than that the community online comes together.
Yeah, yeah, and that is such an important concern. So you've spoken about chronic illness, Ina, and that is definitely something of great concern. If we look at the situation of public health, the burden of disease everywhere in the world, not just in the more developed parts of the world, but absolutely everywhere. When we look at Asia Pacific, there are just so many different concerns, not just about climate change, but also increasing rates of a lot of these illnesses. And you mentioned about cancer. And in fact, just this morning, about half hour before we started, I received news from India that I've lost a dear friend to cancer. She passed away a few hours ago. And she was an activist. She was all about whole food, plant-based nutrition, somebody who was fighting for the cause of um, you know for the cause of climate change and public health and sustainability and so on. She ran an incubator in the city of Bangalore in India. And so chronic illness, the pandemic, Noshin, you mentioned about how real it got for you as a young person, that you even had to skip a school year to be able to, be the primary caregiver to your younger sibling, while your parents had to go out and help other people who may have been stricken with the virus because they're frontline healthcare workers in Bangladesh. And finally, your concern, Leah, is about technology instead of being a connector, becoming an instrument of total isolation and social isolation, and therefore creating anxiety, which it seems like already it's creating for you and for other people around you. Because you're right, this generation seems to have challenges with social skills, being able to come together in person, because they're just so used to being online. Um, all right. So these are the concerns. Now, looking at the future we're headed into, given your concerns, what inspires each of you? Let's move to a little bit of a more positive, direction. Let's start with you.
I right now I currently look to two really exciting things. So first one is food. So since I moved to Hong Kong about roughly 5 years ago, it really opened up because it's more culturally diverse. So I'm able to connect with different cultures through food a lot and through meeting new people. But I think food is just the exciting way, the best way possible for you to get to know a culture and understand what they're about. So that's one that I'm really grateful for and hopeful for, that now we're not just sharing, meals, we're sharing ideas, we're sharing histories even through food. The other thing is still art. Art inspires me, art in museums, art in nature, art that people around me create. I think it's really powerful when even someone who is so, for example, stressed or depressed, and many of the people I work with are people with disabilities as well, that even though we all have our daily struggles, we can still create something, whether that's beautiful or not. It's not the most important thing. It's just we get to express and we get to create, and just for that, that we're already very grateful for. Yeah,
Yeah.
so that's what I find inspiring today.
Food and art, two of my favorite topics. So thank you for sharing that. Leah.
I actually think I would give a pretty similar answer. I think just the variety of tools that are accessible to us to express ourselves. And then also, I want to link back to technology again. I feel like technology is both an opportunity for improvement as well as I explained, can also have a quite destructive force. And I feel like we can use technology to reach people from all over the world. I feel like, for example, it could be a tool for artists to be able to sell their work and to make a living off of it. And so I think that it can definitely be a source of fighting against inequalities and, in general, generating knowledge. And I think especially a field that I'm very passionate about is providing equal access to education to children worldwide. And so I think especially in that regard, technology can be really helpful, because it basically makes knowledge accessible for free and is a transformative force. Yeah.
Yeah. Those are such beautiful thoughts. Technology is an opportunity for equal access to education for all. Nasheen, what about yourself?
Yeah. So, if you know my inspiration right now, honestly, it would be friendships. Like because recently this is a very new experience for me to be immersed in, like, say a multinational classroom and be able to interact with people from diversified cultural backgrounds. And like it was something that, like, say in Harvard, I remember it was like say 8 people in our team, and it was like from 6 different countries, and even people with the same nationality had different, like, other like they grew up somewhere else, they worked somewhere else. So even so, it's like the perspectives, like I know that we all had a shared drive for, say, mental health, but the ideas that we were talking about it, like, and the diverse context and the knowledge they brought was something so different to me and so novel. And it is something that I actively started doing after coming back as well. Like in my psychology classes, I see that when people are asked to answer some basic questions, like say basic as in, something that you'd come to a conclusion on your own, you wouldn't need other readings. But when you ask like people from different backgrounds, and they will have completely different opinions based on the values they grew up and they saw around them. So I feel like this is something that has been very inspiring to me, to be able to connect with people from different backgrounds and just spend time listening to what it was like for them growing up, and talk about similar issues. Because even when you have shared interests and, like, say the same ideas, the thought process is super different, and it always gives you new things to learn. So this is definitely something that's been inspiring me, just to meet different people from different places and hear them talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, thank you so much. You touch upon something really important, which is the process of how we arrive at similar
Yeah.
conclusions, and those processes, those turning points and those turning processes might be very unique and personal, or even culturally different for
Right.
different people. Um, so all of those things, they inspire me as well. The food, the art, as a social glue that Ina mentioned, technology as an equal access, as a vehicle for equal access to education, knowledge, and awareness that Leah mentioned, and friendships, being able to strike those friendships that are deeply entrenched in values, whether they're similar to us or not similar to us, but just something that is just so mind opening. So thank you so much for sharing that. Now we get into hopes. So, what are your deepest hopes, given given these things that inspire you, and given the future we're headed into?
Personally, I just really hope for a future that is more open. Like the more conversations we have, the more, for example, whether it's again through food or art, like just sharing your own ideas, your own background, your own values, that will be more open and understanding to each other, the more we are just having that communication.
Yeah, thank you. Open communication. Yeah, Leah.
Um, I I think my deepest hope is that we use these like neutral tools, like as I mentioned, technology, but also, for example, globalization, to really treat those generational problems that we've been carrying. Um, which, when I think of examples, like for example, that we can to some, maybe not solve, but to some degree treat discrimination that is still happening across the entire world, and become more open towards other communities. And I think the best way to do that is through exposure. So I just hope that we can create places where people can connect and people can get to know other people, and just develop a more open and more tolerant approach to other people. So
Yes.
I think that would be my deepest hope. And I think that would have such a profound effect on every other aspect of society, that I think that would be the main thing.
Yes, absolutely. Globalization, open spaces, equal spaces, equity-based places so that we're able to address generational trauma, intergenerational issues, stigmatized issues, and things that Noshin has been also, devoting her time towards activism. Noshin, talk to us about your.
Yeah, so just just adding to where she left off about tolerance, that's also something that I really, really want to see in my ideal future. That where people are tolerant of other people's opinions, cultural differences, and all of that, right? So, like that the usual late stage capitalism rant apart. If I wanted to visualize, say, an ideal world, I would say I want to live in a world that is doing its best to be its best, right? As I said like a minute ago, that right now I don't feel we're doing our best. I don't feel our policies are the best it could be. Policies are something that I do really have an interest in. I feel like right now our policies are like global policies. There need to be more global policies that are restructured to catering all kinds of people.
Hmm.
There has to be equity, like just like we just had International Women's Day, and we knew, and we it's so surprising to see that the pay gap has gotten worse over time. Like now there's like 105 years gap that it will take to get over that gap. And it's just, I feel like we're not doing a good enough job. So in the future I want to see people doing our best, and really, and when we say best, it should be for everyone, irrespective of where they are, which category of countries they fall into, and which part of the sect they are in their country. So yeah,
Yeah,
that.
yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. I completely concur with all three of you. And it seems like you're picking up different strands, but for the same hope that you have around uh, creation of openness, greater tolerance that you mentioned, both Ina and Leah, and as well as you, Nashin. And absolutely. And, in addition to human beings, I think that one of the big things we also need to think about is the treatment of other than humans, people we consider as animals, and we human beings oftentimes forget that we're animals too, right? So we forget in the otherness that we create in creating these distinctions on the basis of nationality, ethnicity, color, religion, and so on. We also create a similar distinction as far as species is concerned. So there's for as Nashin mentioned that she would like to see a world that's operating at its best, to be its best. So for us to be able to do that, we have to bring both human as well as other than humans in the definition of that and in the process of that. Now, my final question to the three of you: what's the part you would like to play, or you might already be playing, in support of a future you deeply hope for your generation?
I really hope that I can continue to just start conversations with people to, for example, get to care more about their mental health. Uh, as I mentioned, I've been working with people with disabilities and other people who are experiencing a lot of stress in their lives, and sometimes they don't even know that they already need help. It's just like, oh, once you just start a
Yeah.
conversation and listen, then they can realize that, oh, this is actually helpful, that I do need this. So yeah, I just really hope that I can continue to play a part in that regard.
Yeah, great. Leah.
I think I would like to become a source, or I'm trying already to be a source of kindness and a source of initiative, I would say. So, for example, I've recently started to go solo tripping a lot, and I've started talking to strangers, and I've learned about their experiences, and
Hey,
I'm trying to
same.
and I'm trying to learn more about people that have entirely different perspectives from mine. And I also think that I'm using those experiences as a way to reflect on how I view the world, but also to correct my behavior and to overall become a more tolerant person and more open person. And so I think I really want to be a source of connecting people as well as connecting myself within that entire net
Yeah,
and building those genuine connections.
that's such a kind thought, and that's awesome that you're solo tripping. So tell us, Noshin.
Yeah, so how I think I can play a role in future. So let's say I have mentioned that I have an interest in policy making and regarding, and my passion is mental health. So I combined my studies to like economics and psychology double specialization because I wanted to be in a place of power where I can make more policies regarding mental health. See, the place I come from in Bangladesh, right now the population is around 163 million, and there's one mental health facility of 200 bed for 163 people, and that is also like centered in like the capital. So like less than 0.5% people actually have access to mental health for back home. And this is definitely something I want to go back and be able to contribute to changing. Like that moment that I can say I felt I wanted to do this was like, again, something that I think Leah mentioned, that a lot of the time people don't know they need the help, right? So this is not a burning issue back home because people don't even recognize this is a problem, right? See, like for me, I wanted to do this because I used to tutor kids, right, for like 3 years, and I ran into three different cases where I had to intervene actively to get these children mental health like help. And also I do think this was an act of privilege because they were in a location where they were able to access it after I introduced them to these ideas. Because it was this little kid who starts shaking every time her parents are shouting in the next room, and nobody thinks something is wrong with it, right? Or you see another person who struggles with anxiety so much they can't form one sentence, and everyone's like, yeah, she's probably just shy. And when you have studied psychology and you have some ideas, you're able to catch the cues, and you're like, no, she would do a lot better. Like you could do a lot better in life if you just got the help you needed. And that is definitely something that has kept me up at night, especially because I did have access to these people, all young, right? The third child was also, she was like, I think 5 years younger than me, and her parents didn't want to send her to college, so she was going through a lot. And I ended up using up my savings to go to her hometown, bring her, and have her attend like exams in the city so she could get into like the school she wanted. And that my experience from that and was that the levels of anxiety in especially like teenagers and young population goes unnoticed because we are unwilling to give them that space that you are allowed to get help. And that is definitely something I want to have an active role, and no matter which scale I am able to change and bring that conversation back home.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for the part that you're already playing, all three of you, in tackling the concerns that you've so eloquently explained in this conversation. Let me ask you this one question that was just bubbling up in my head. When we think about climate change, globally, and also as you may have witnessed it happening in places where you're originally from, or places where you're at this point, if it's different, um, what role do you think that the climate upset and the geopolitical upset going on in the world has a role to play in the anxiety of young people at this point in time?
I feel
Oh,
like, again, a very similar issue is that a lot of the time people, this is from my personal experience because the term eco anxiety was something novel I learned in the Harvard conference. I was not aware this about this term or the concept, but then I realized how I've experienced it over the years. I just didn't have a word for it, and I feel like this is a very common phenomena with most people out there, especially because I'm not sure about other countries here, but Bangladesh, Maldives, these are the countries that are in the high risk of getting flooded, and like the first countries to go underwater when the climate change hits. And so you would think this would be the biggest problem out there, right? But it's not, because again, people experience the anxiety when they're planning their future. They're like, hey, we don't really know where we're going to be in 20 years. But they don't stop and have that, let's do something so that we are here after 20 years. So I feel like there is this gap, that where people are experiencing that despair, that hopelessness regarding the future, but they're unable to put a finger on it and incorporate that into, like, actual policies or laws that will help them evade this.
Yeah, got it. You raise a very important point. Ina, I think you were starting to say something.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, no, it's okay. I also have that same sentiment that personally, uh, it's I think it's affecting not just personal, individual people, but it's also affecting nations. Like, for example, in Philippines, my home country, it's really because we're a largely agricultural country. It's really changed over the years, and you can see the impact that climate change has had. So it is worrying for a nation, and not just and even when I came here to Hong Kong and moved, it is still, haunting me to this day because even here, like I can feel its effects. And again, linking back to my health concerns, like with the more um, progressive and more modern Hong Kong, I do feel that effects on my health as well.
Mhm.
Like, oh, there are different, I don't know, pollution levels possibly maybe. So yeah, it's like it is really worrying. But I do think that there is a hope still. Like a lot of different people are trying their best to advocate for better policies, and also a lot of initiatives from whether they're NGOs or government groups here. Like I can see that a lot more people recently in the past 2, 3 years are putting in more effort to this. So I'm really hopeful for that.
Yeah, yeah. And Leah.
I think I would touch on a very similar point as Noshin. I think there's two major problems. I think the first major problem is that a lot of people can't actually put a finger on it, and they actually, I think, don't have a point of comparison. So people that are my age, they have not experienced nature when it wasn't this drastically affected by climate change. And so we are often out of touch with nature, but we do not recognize that that may be a source of anxiety. We just perceive the anxiety and then are often blamed for it ourselves, but we can't actually localize the source of the anxiety often. So I think that is more of a subconscious issue. I think the other big problem is that students that study about climate change, they actually feel very helpless because they feel too young to be able to do something or too young to be taken serious, but they still feel the anxiety of it. And I think, especially in my generation and in my environment, I see a lot of students that are able to have that long sight to see how drastically climate change is going to affect our life, but they feel like they do not have the political experience to do something about it, or they're being ridiculed for it. And so there's this like imbalance of power, combined with like that helplessness, I think, is another huge source of anxiety. So I think that also knowing about climate change can actually be a huge source of anxiety. It goes both ways.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for, sharing all of these insights. You're absolutely correct. The situation is far more complex and complicated when it comes to younger persons or different age groups. If you think about it, the older generation that might have the influence and the power at this point in time may be too short-termist, and so in many ways, just like some of the younger people may not even be aware or be able to connect the dots between where the source of all of this is. So we end up faltering into a lot of short-termist policies, like let's change the light bulbs in our house. Now, just changing the light bulbs in our house isn't necessarily going to address the situation with the teenager in the family who's undergoing certain negative emotions, and they don't have the vocabulary or even the awareness and the knowledge to be able to talk to their parents or their caregivers or their teachers and so on. So it ends up um, in some ways being externalized in ways that are detrimental, or even may end up causing self-harm to that specific individual, and not to mention the wider impact it may have on their social, uh, social circle, or their academic circle, and so on. And the second thing is that when as you grow up, and if you happen to be sufficiently interested in these topics, and you study sustainability, or start to learn more about planetary health boundaries and so on, or even go to medical school and you see the burden of chronic illness, that definitely is a picture of doom and gloom at this point, which tends to create a lot of anxiety. Well, thank you so much, Ina and Noshin and Leah, from different parts of the world at this point. This is such a global conversation and globally relevant topic and globally relevant conversation. I look forward to continuing this conversation, in the future. I look forward to following you guys on social media and learning more about, what you're doing academically as well as professionally. Thank you so much for taking out the time and making the effort to join Divinity and me for this very important conversation today. Thanks for everything you're doing.
Thank you so much
Thank
for having
you.
Thank you
us.
so much too.